The observation deck of the Zendari flagship hung silent, and the vast darkness of Space Commander Vex stood motionless, his crystalline form catching the light from distant stars as he studied the pale blue planet below Earth rotated slowly. A fragile world orbiting an ordinary sun in a sector the Galactic Coalition had long considered unremarkable. The Zendari commander felt a surge of confidence course through his being. This planet would be easy to conquer. The reports from the Coalition's intelligence division had been clear and specific. Primitive technology, weak military infrastructure, scattered governments unable to act as one unified force. Humans were territorial creatures, constantly fighting amongst themselves, divided by borders and competing ideologies. They would fall quickly. Vex turned from the observation window and made his way through the ship's corridors toward the council chamber. His soldiers moved aside as he passed, their expressions showing the rigid discipline of the Zendari military. These warriors had conquered 17 star systems in the past 5 cycles. They understood conquest and domination with a precision that had never failed them. The Galactic Coalition Council sat in their vast circular chamber. Representatives from 8 major species, arranged in a perfect geometric formation. Commander Vex approached the central platform with measured steps, all eyes turned toward him. From the insectoid features of the Krell to the luminous forms of the Vian delegations, Vex presented his strategic analysis with mathematical precision. The human species possessed valuable mineral deposits beneath their surface. Their strategic location offered control of 3 major trade routes. Most importantly, their complete defeat would demonstrate to other developing species that resistance to coalition authority was fuel. The council voted within moments. The decision was unanimous. A Zendari invasion fleet would depart within the solar cycle, carrying enough firepower to overwhelm any human resistance in less than 7 days. Vex felt the satisfaction of victory before a single weapon had been fired across the vast distance of space. On a space station orbiting Earth, Major Derek Chun stood in the communications center with growing dread in his chest. For 3 days, his team had intercepted encrypted transmissions using patterns that suggested military coordination. The language was alien, but the encryption protocols revealed organization and planning. Derek was not a man who panicked. He had served in Earth's United Defense Force for 23 years, working his way up from pilot to commander through intelligence, skill, and an almost supernatural ability to see patterns others missed. But this pattern terrified him. Called Captain Lisa Rodriguez into the secure briefing room. Lisa was his oldest friend in the military, someone who had stood with him through 6 different planetary conflicts and countless diplomatic missions. She studied the data on the displays with an expression that gradually shifted from skepticism to grim understanding and invasion. She said quietly, Derek nodded. Not a probe or a trade expedition, but a military operation. He spent the next 8 hours working through the encrypted data, cross-referencing it with every pattern database. The United Defense Force maintained the sheer volume of transmissions suggested a fleet of unprecedented size. The tactical signatures indicated multiple battle cruisers, carrier vessels, and support ships. Derek was looking at an invasion force that outnumbered humanity's entire space navy by at least 15 to 1. He immediately requested an emergency meeting with the Earth Defense Council. The response was bureaucratic delay followed by cautious skepticism. A general named Morrison suggested they were jumping to conclusions based on limited data. A diplomat named Catherine Wells argued for sending peaceful contact probes. A politician from the Pacific Coalition wanted further study before alerting the global population. Derek felt frustration burning inside him, but he kept his voice steady and professional. as he presented. The evidence again and again, every hour they wasted was an hour the invaders drew closer. He authorized his team to begin quiet mobilization of Earth's defensive forces anyway. Young pilots like Kevin Thompson and Amy Foster were called from their assignments and briefed on the situation. Military facilities worldwide began subtle preparations without causing public panic. Still, Derek knew it would not be enough. Humanity's ships were older, built during an era when space warfare seemed like a distant theoretical concern. Their weapon systems, while functional, were generations behind the technological signatures his team had analyzed. He pushed his team to work faster. Rachel Morris, a physicist who had volunteered for military service despite her civilian background, began running simulation models. The results were not encouraging. Without major tactical advantages, a direct confrontation would result in Earth's complete military defeat within days. Derek stood on the observation deck at midnight, staring down at the planet he was sworn to protect. Somewhere below, millions of people slept peacefully, unaware that their world stood at the edge of invasion. Families rested in their homes. Children dreamed their innocent dreams. Governments conducted business as usual. Derek made a decision that night when the aliens arrived. Earth would not surrender without a fight. They would not accept subjugation or invasion without resistance, even if they could not win. Humanity would make it costly for any force that tried to conquer them. He returned to the communications center and found Lisa already there. Running additional analysis, she looked up at him with understanding. The Zendari fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system exactly as Derek's team had predicted. 8 massive battle cruisers arranged in perfect military formation, 23 support vessels, countless smaller craft that blipped across the sensors like deadly insects. The sight was stunning in its overwhelming size and power, but Derek Chun was already in motion. Every pilot in Earth's defense force was in their cockpit. Every ship was powered and ready for engagement. Military channels burst with communication. As Derek coordinated Earth's response, the Zendari sent a transmission offering terms of surrender. Derek's response was clear. Earth would not yield. The first human ships launched toward the invading fleet. They were smaller, slower, and less powerful than their opponents, but they moved with purpose and coordination that would have surprised the Zendari if they had bothered to consider it. The first battle began not with overwhelming firepower, but with the determined will of people defending their home. Derek watched from the command center as human and alien forces clashed. For the first time, this was the moment everything changed. The Zendari were about to learn that they had made a terrible mistake. They had invaded a world inhabited by creatures they did not understand. Creatures who would fight with every ounce of determination in their bodies. They had gone to war with humans, and they were about to meet the true terrors of a battle zone. The Zendari strategy became clear. Within hours, multiple weapons platforms were being positioned around Earth in a coordinated pattern that could only serve one purpose: orbital bombardment preparation. Commander Vex had decided that if Earth would not surrender through military defeat, then the destruction of cities and populations would break human will to resist. Derek Chun received the intelligence confirmation from his monitoring stations and felt something shift inside him. This was no longer a military conflict between armed forces. This was genocide planned with cold, calculated precision. He called an emergency command meeting with every ranking officer available. The situation was dire. He explained the Zendari intended to destroy Earth's cities within the next solar cycle. If they succeeded, millions would die, entire civilizations would be erased. They had to stop the bombardment platform construction before it became operational. The problem was obvious. Any direct assault on the platforms would require penetrating heavy Zendari defenses. It would require a team small enough to avoid detection, but skilled enough to destroy the platform from within it. was a suicide mission by any reasonable military analysis. Derek outlined the plan anyway, because it was the only option that mattered. They would take a captured Centauri transport vessel, use forged transponder codes to approach the bombardment platform, then launch an assault. From inside the structure itself, the team would need to reach the core power systems and detonate the internal charges that Dr. Rachel Morris had been secretly preparing. They would need to escape before detonation, and they would need to do this all while heavily outnumbered and facing advanced alien soldiers. Derek finished his briefing and waited for responses. No one moved for a moment. Then Navy pilot Brandon Hayes stood up. "I volunteer." He said simply, "I have flown captured ships before, and I know the attack patterns." Engineer Marcus Powell was next. "I can get you to the power core," he said, his voice steady. "I know these systems." More volunteers came, scientists who understood the technology, soldiers who had trained for impossible odds, people who understood that some things mattered more than survival. Derek looked at these brave people with deep respect and profound sadness. He knew most of them would not return, but he also knew that if they did not try, millions of others would certainly die. The small team was assembled and equipped. Captain Brandon Hayes piloted the captured transport with skill that came from 20 years of military experience. Engineer Marcus Powell ran calculations on the blueprint schematics, thus checked weapons and prepared explosives as they approached the bombardment platform. Derek transmitted a message to each of them. "What you are doing will be remembered," he said, "not just by humanity, but by every conscious being in this galaxy. You are fighting for something that transcends military objectives. You are fighting for survival, for hope, for the future." The transport docked at the platform without triggering alarms. The Zendari sensors recognized the vessel signature and allowed the approach. Brandon led the team through corridors filled with alien soldiers. They moved with practiced precision, taking out guards before they could sound alarms. But the deeper they penetrated, the more soldiers they encountered. The element of surprise could only last so long. Rachel Morris was wounded first, a plasma blast catching her shoulder, but she continued forward, her hand pressed to the wound, her determination unshaken. They reached the power core chamber where Marcus began placing the explosive charges. But Zendari reinforcements had been called. A squad of elite soldiers moved to intercept them. Marcus realized in that moment what he had to do. He sealed the blast doors from the inside, locking his teammates on the safe side, while keeping himself in the chamber with the approaching enemy. His voice came through the communication channel. "Calm and resolute, go," he said to Brandon and the others. "I will hold them here and complete the sequence. Finish the mission." Brandon tried to protest, tried to find another way, but there was no time. The charges were armed. The team retreated through the corridors as behind them Marcus Powell faced the Zendari soldiers with a courage that none of them had expected. He fought with tools and remaining weapons, buying seconds and then minutes for his team to escape. When they reached the transport, the explosive charges detonated. The bombardment platform erupted in a cascade of explosions. Structure began breaking apart in the vacuum of space. The team escaped in the transport as sections of the platform fell away into Earth's atmosphere. The mission was complete, but Marcus Powell died in that power core, his body consumed in the explosion. His final act was to protect his teammates from danger. He chose death for others to live. When the news reached Earth, something changed in the human consciousness. Information networks carried Marcus Powell's name. Across the planet, stories of his sacrifice spread through every nation, every culture, every community. He was celebrated as a hero, mourned as a friend, remembered as someone who gave everything. But rather than breaking human morale, his sacrifice ignited something fierce and determined. Within hours, recruitment centers were overwhelmed. People who had been uncertain about fighting now stepped forward with resolve. Engineers who had stayed neutral now joined the war effort. Pilots who had been hesitant now volunteered for dangerous missions. Marcus Powell had showed humanity what sacrifice truly meant, and in his death, he had awoken something that the Zindari could never have anticipated, a species willing to risk everything, to lose everything, to give everything for something greater than themselves. Derek stood in the command center, aware that the grief of losing Marcus would weigh on him for the rest of his life. But he also understood that Marcus's death had created something the Zindari could not fight. He had created a unity of purpose across all of humanity, a determination that transcended fear, a willingness to face any enemy and any cost for survival. Derek looked at the tactical displays and made a decision. Earth would not defend passively any longer. They would attack. They would pursue the Zindari with every resource they could muster. They would show the galaxy that going to war with humans meant facing something far more dangerous than weapons or tactics. It meant facing the deep human capacity for vengeance, born from sacrifice. Commander Vex could not understand what was happening. His fleet had superior firepower, superior technology, and superior numbers. Yet the human ships continued to fight with an intensity that defied logical explanation. A Zindari pilot named Kess transmitted from his battlecruiser that the human fighters were using unpredictable patterns of movement. They did not follow standard military doctrine found in any coalition database. Instead, they improvised, adapted, and attacked from unexpected vectors. When one human ship was damaged, others moved to protect it instead of focusing on optimal damage patterns. This made no strategic sense. The Zindari were built on efficiency, and logic. Emotions were weakness. Unpredictability was error, and sacrifice was illogical. Yet, the humans seemed to operate on entirely different principles. Major Derek Chun watched his tactical display with fierce concentration. One of his pilots, Kevin Thompson, had just destroyed an alien fighter despite his own craft taking significant damage. Kevin was bringing his ship back to the station for emergency repairs, while simultaneously providing cover fire for a damaged transport vessel. That was not strategy taught in human military academies. That was choice. That was humans choosing to risk themselves for others. Derek spoke into the command channel, his voice steady and clear. All pilots continue pursuit, but prioritize survival of damaged craft. Pilot Thompson, break off and dock for repairs. When you clear this sector. Kevin's voice came back immediately. Understood. Command, but I can get 3 more shots in before I break through it. Kevin, Derek said, and then break off. That was how humans won with inferior technology. They made decisions that balanced individual survival with collective success. They understood that loyalty and sacrifice held power that no alien military had anticipated on the Zindari flagship. Younger soldiers watched the battle unfold with growing unease. A communications officer named Tieran was monitoring human broadcast signals when something unprecedented occurred. A transmission came through from Earth itself, showing families watching the battle on their planet. Parents stood with their arms around children. Spouses held each other as they watched their loved ones fighting in space. The broadcast showed an elderly woman speaking to the camera, her face lined with concern and pride. That is my grandson up there, she said, her voice filled with emotion that the Zindari found incomprehensible. His name is Kevin Thompson, and he is fighting for all of us when his ship sustains damage. We feel that damage when he survives. We celebrate his survival. This is what humans do. When those we love face danger, we stand together. We hope together, we fear together. The transmission was simple and raw and deeply disturbing. To Zindari consciousness room reported this to his superiors, who seemed equally unsettled. Concept of emotional investment in individual soldiers was theoretically documented in their study of human behavior, but witnessing it created something unexpected in the young Zindari soldiers. Something close to doubt. Derek noticed the Zindari offensive pattern becoming slightly less efficient. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. But it was there. He immediately recognized the Bayeresta opportunity. He called Dr. Rachel Morris to the command center. He explained his theory to her quickly. The invaders are learning that we are something they did not expect. They are processing information that contradicts their assumptions about us, that creates hesitation. And hesitation creates opportunity. Rachel understood immediately. What if we showed them more? She said, what if we broadcast our history? Everything we have survived and overcome. Derek felt a spark of hope. Do it. He said, organize transmissions from every major human civilization on Earth. Send them everything showing our struggles, our wars, our revolutions, our survival against impossible odds. The Zendari need to understand what they are fighting. Rachel worked through the night, coordinating with governments across Earth. By the next solar rotation, transmissions began flowing toward the Zendari fleet. Videos of human history, spanning thousands of years, stories of plague and famine, that humanity survived, accounts of wars where humans fought against overwhelming odds and refused to surrender, images of humans digging themselves out of ruins and building new civilizations. The transmission showed humans climbing mountains with bare hands, humans crossing deserts and oceans simply to survive, humans creating arts and music and literature in the darkest times. It was a portrait of a species forged in violence and hardship, a species that had learned to thrive through adversity. Commander Vex received the transmissions with growing comprehension. He realized with chilling clarity that these were not primitive creatures facing their first major conflict. These were warriors born from a world that had taught them to fight, to adapt, to refuse surrender. Every human soldier aboard those ships had ancestors who had survived catastrophe after catastrophe. They were not fighting from tradition or discipline. Like Zendari soldiers, they were fighting from something deeper. They were fighting from the ancient knowledge that survival was possible even against impossible odds, that surrender meant extinction, that sacrifice could mean salvation for others. Vex began calculating casualty projections with new variables added to his models. Results were shocking at current engagement rates and with human tactical improvements. The invasion could not be won within the planned timeline. It might not be won at all. For the first time in his military career, Commander Vex considered the possibility of failure. He immediately drafted new orders for tactical escalation. If humans refused to break quickly through conventional means, then other methods would be employed, methods that his earlier calculations had deemed unnecessary, methods that would prove that the Zendari would not accept resistance from a primitive species. Derek stood with Lisa and Rachel in the command center as new transmissions came through from Zendari fleet positions. The signal showed movement reorganization. Atmosphere on the station grew tense. Lisa looked at Derek with the question in her eyes. What are they planning? She asked. Derek studied the data with growing dread. I do not know yet, he said quietly, but whatever it is, we need to be ready. The first battle had been survived, but Derek sensed that the true conflict was only beginning. Zendari had learned what humans were. Now they would test just how far that knowledge would take them. The human offensive began not with overwhelming firepower, but with tactical intelligence and coordinated assault. Derek Chun worked through sleep cycles, analyzing the Zendari vessel compositions, defensive patterns, and logistical supply lines. What emerged from his analysis was not a frontal assault strategy, but something more subtle and devastating. Cut the supply lines, disrupt communication networks, force the enemy into reaction mode instead of action mode. Pilot Kevin Thompson led the first strike against the Zendari supply convoy. His fighter squadron moved through the darkness of space with the kind of precision that came from desperation and skill. They hit the convoy hard and fast, destroying support vessels and scattering supplies meant for the main fleet. Then they withdrew before Zendari reinforcements could arrive. Tactic was repeated again and again. Different teams, different targets, same strategy. The Zendari fleet was being slowly strangled by the loss of supplies and support, but Derek knew this would not be enough. The real advantage came when he reached out to the neutral species that orbited the outer colonies, the Keelani traders, the Vian merchants. Even some of the Krell merchant houses, he offered them something the Zendari could not: fair trade, honest dealing, and protection if they joined the human cause. When species began defecting from the coalition's passive neutrality to active human support, it shifted the balance of power. Intelligence about Zendari vulnerabilities began flowing to Derek. Reports of internal power struggles within the Zendari military hierarchy, information about weapon system limitations that human engineers could exploit, knowledge of weak point in their armor plating. The war transformed from an impossible struggle against a superior enemy into a complex conflict where multiple species now worked together against the Zendari invasion. But Commander Vex was not a fool when he realized that his invasion was becoming a prolonged war instead of a quick conquest. He began adapting his strategy. He concentrated his forces, abandoned outlying positions, and prepared for a final overwhelming assault designed to break human resistance. Derek received warning of this new strategy through his growing network of allies. The Zendari would make one last concentrated push against Earth. They would commit the majority of their remaining fleet to a single massive attack. It was a gamble, but a logical one. If they could destroy Earth's defensive station and eliminate the command structure they had learned to fear, the remaining human resistance would crumble. Derek understood this and made a decision that shocked his military council. He would evacuate the station before the attack. The civilian personnel, the support staff, and the non-essential personnel would be transferred to safe coordinates. Only essential combat personnel would remain. He was moving the battle away from the region above Earth. He was taking the fight into open space where the Zendari numerical advantage would be reduced. Captain Nicole Hayes, Brandon's sister and now a squadron commander herself, led nearly 1,000 human pilots in coordinated attack patterns. The new pilots lacked some of the experience of the veterans, but they had something else. They had the knowledge of Marcus Powell's sacrifice. They fought with the understanding that their actions mattered, that surrender was not an option, that humans had proven they could face impossible odds and survive. The scale of the battle that developed exceeded anything either side had previously engaged in. Thousands of fighters screaming through the void, capital ships exchanging fire across vast distances. Zendari's superior technology was offset by human tactics that seemed to come from pure creative desperation when facing a heavily shielded enemy vessel. Humans did not attack the shield. They found alternate routes, attacked from unexpected angles, exploited the brief moments when shields flickered during power redistribution when facing Zendari soldiers in boarding actions. Humans fought with ferocity that stunned their enemies. The Zendari were stronger, faster, more heavily armored, but humans fought with something the aliens did not understand. Humans fought with the knowledge that their families depended on them. Humans fought to protect something they loved that changed everything. The Zendari military, built on logic and efficiency, began experiencing something that did not fit their psychological framework. They began experiencing fear. Reports came from Zendari soldiers returning from combat that humans fought without regard for their own safety. A single human soldier would engage multiple Zendari warriors to protect a teammate. Humans would charge into fire to retrieve the wounded. They would die to save others. This was not military strategy. This was something the Zendari biology and psychology could not process as the war of attrition continued. The Zendari advantage eroded supply lines that the humans kept disrupting, meant fewer replacements for damaged ships. Ammunition that could not be resupplied meant inferior firepower as weapons failed. but human production lines on Earth worked around. The clock, new ships were being built, new weapons were being manufactured, new pilots were being trained. The humans, unlike the Zendari, were fighting for their home world. They were fighting with the infinite resources of an entire planet behind them. Commander Vex realized with horror what was happening. The invasion he had launched with supreme confidence had transformed into a grinding war of attrition that humanity was winning. Called for one final desperate maneuver, a kamikaze attack using his personal command vessel. He would break through human defenses and attack their command structure directly. If he could kill Derek Chun and eliminate the coordinating intelligence, the human resistance might yet collapse. The Sindari commander prepared his vessel for the final assault. He moved through his bridge with the rigid bearing of someone prepared for honorable death. The humans had taught him that some conflicts could not be won, but perhaps they could still be ended. Derek received the warning that Commander Vex was moving toward the command center. He looked at Lisa Rodriguez and at the other officers surrounding him. He made a decision. He would meet Vex in single combat. He would face the Zendari commander alone. The battle station grew quiet as Derek Chun moved toward the docking bay behind him. Lisa managed the ongoing combat operations. The stage was set for the final confrontation that would determine the fate of the entire war. The airlock between the two command vessels hissed open. Derek Chun stepped through into the Zendari ship, wearing only basic armor and carrying a single weapon behind him. Lisa Rodriguez locked the airlock from the human side. There would be no retreat, no escape, no option except victory or death. Commander Vex waited in the central chamber of his vessel, his crystalline form catching the artificial light. His weapon, more advanced and more powerful than Derek's, hung ready at his side. The two warriors circled each other with the understanding that this moment transcended their individual conflict. This was humanity facing the unknown. This was the Zendari facing their first true defeat. Vex attacked with the speed and precision his biology allowed. His movements were calculated, efficient, deadly. Derek moved to defend himself and found immediately that he was slower, weaker, outmaneuvered. The Zendari blow struck his shoulder, nearly dislocating his arm. Blood ran down Derek's chest as another strike caught him across the ribs. A normal human would have collapsed, but Derek was fighting for something that transcended biological advantage. He was fighting for his species. He was fighting for the families watching from Earth. He was fighting for Marcus Powell and everyone else who had died. Derek absorbed the pain and continued moving. He did not fight with Sindari efficiency. He fought with human stubborn refusal to fall when Vex struck again. Derek did not dodge. Instead, he moved into the blow, accepting more damage in exchange for getting close enough to strike back. His weapon found Vex's shoulder, drawing alien blood. The two warriors grappled, and Derek discovered something about physical combat that alien warriors had never needed to learn. Humans were more willing to be hurt. Humans could tolerate pain that would have forced a Zendari into shock. Humans could continue fighting while bleeding, while broken, while burning. Each moment of the combat saw Derek take more damage, but each moment also saw him refuse to surrender. He refused to quit. He refused to fall. He refused to accept defeat. Vex grew increasingly desperate as his calculations showed that this human, despite being physically inferior, would not stop fighting. The Zendari commander realized with growing horror that he was fighting something that defied the logical framework of all his military experience. A creature willing to die rather than submit. A creature capable of transcending biological limitation through sheer force of will. Derek was weakening from blood loss and injury. His movements were becoming slower. His strength was fading, but his eyes remained fixed on Vex with unbreakable determination. In that moment of realization, when Vex hesitated for just a fraction of a second, Derek moved. He struck with everything remaining in his damaged body. His weapon connected with precision. that came from a human understanding of anatomy and vulnerability. Commander Vex fell the greatest. Zindari warrior fell to a human covered in his own blood. Broken and dying and completely undefeated Derek collapsed beside the fallen commander. Gasping for breath, the medical team from the human station rushed into the chamber. They found Derek barely conscious. Severely wounded, but still breathing, they found Commander Vex dead. His form inert and final. The signal of Vex's defeat rippled through the Zindari fleet faster than any communication system could have transmitted it. Video of the confrontation was already spreading through all channels. The Zindari soldiers watched their undefeated commander fall to a human warrior, and the will to continue fighting shattered like fragile crystal ships began retreating fleet commanders. Transmitted surrender signals. The Zindari invasion was ending not with human defeat, but with the collapse of Zindari conviction. Humans were not the weaker species they had assumed. Humans were something far more formidable. Weeks later, the Galactic Coalition Council convened an emergency session. The representatives of 8 major species gathered to address what had occurred. Humanity had defeated a Zindari invasion force. A species considered primitive had driven back one of the galaxy's greatest military powers. The debates were intense and far-reaching. Some species called for human restriction and containment. Others argued for immediate human inclusion. In coalition decision-making, the consensus came slowly but firmly. Earth and humanity would be recognized as a full member of the Galactic Coalition. Derek Chun, promoted to Admiral, was invited to address the council. He stood before the assembled species in a chamber designed for beings far different from human. His wounds had healed, but he would carry scars from the conflict for the rest of his life. Vex's scar in particular was visible across his face and neck. Admiral Derek Chun looked at the representatives of each species. "You came to conquer," he said, his voice steady and clear. "You believed we were primitive and weak. You believed we would surrender. You were wrong about all of these things. But you also discovered something important about humanity. We do not fight to conquer. We fight to survive. We do not kill for glory. We kill to protect those we love. We do not surrender, because surrender means watching our families destroyed. Go to war with humans, and you will face beings who refuse to break. You will meet creatures who sacrifice themselves so others can live. You will encounter a species that grows stronger through adversity and more determined through suffering. We have no desire to conquer the galaxy. We ask only for the right to exist in peace, and if that peace is threatened, you now know what will face you." Derek finished speaking and waited. The council voted unanimously to recognize human membership in the coalition and to establish formal peace with Earth. As Derek left the council chamber, his team was waiting for Enlisa Rodriguez stood with Kevin Thompson and Amy Foster. Captain Brandon Hayes stood with his sister Nicole, who had become a decorated pilot. Dr. Rachel Morris was there, her shoulder still healing from her wound. These were the people who had fought the war with him. These were the survivors who had endured the impossible together. They looked out at the stars from the observation deck of the human embassy below them. Earth rotated peacefully, a world forever changed by a conflict that no one had anticipated on that world. Families mourned their fallen like Marcus Powell schools taught about the war, and the heroes who fought it. Memorials were built in every nation to honor those who had sacrificed, but alongside the grief was something else: hope. The knowledge that humanity had proven itself to the galaxy. Knowledge that humans were not fragile or primitive. Humans were warriors born from a harsh world who had learned to survive against impossible odds. The true terror of a battle zone was not weapons or technology. It was the unbreakable determination of beings fighting for their home. It was the sacrifice of individuals willing to die for others. It was the human spirit that refused to surrender no matter the cost, and the galaxy now understood this truth. They had learned it through blood and struggle and the courage of ordinary humans doing extraordinary things. Derek Chun returned to Earth as a hero, but he never truly left the command center he continued to serve. Knowing that the universe was vast and unknown dangers might emerge again, if they did, humanity would be ready. Humans would always be ready, because they had learned the deepest lesson of all, that the greatest strength comes not from superior technology or superior biology, but from the choice to never give up, never surrender, never abandon those fighting at your side. Humans had gone to war with an alien empire, and they had discovered they possessed a strength their enemies could never have anticipated. Galaxy would remember. The galaxy would fear. The galaxy would respect. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through conquest, but through courage, not through domination, but through determination, not through superior weapons, but through superior. Well, the true terrors of a battle zone had shown themselves, and they were human.